So, think about this. When you are just completely lost in the woods, the standard advice is always to find north, right?
Right, you pull out a compass.
Exactly. You find true north, and you basically use that absolute truth to figure out your reality and navigate your way out.
Yeah, it acts as the ultimate anchor. I mean, it's the definitive map of your position in the physical world.
Right. But what if the magnetic field is just suddenly going absolutely crazy?
Oh, man.
Like, what if the compass needle is just spinning wildly and standing there staring at it, trying to figure out the exact perfect truth of where north is actually the very thing that's going to get you killed because, I don't know, a massive storm is rolling in.
Well, yeah, in that scenario, looking for north becomes a fatal distraction.
Exactly.
You have to stop searching for the objective layout of the forest and just look for the path of least resistance. You don't need the absolute truth of the geography to survive. You just need to maintain your navigability through a chaotic environment.
And that paradigm shift is the exact territory we are exploring today. Welcome to the deep dive, by the way. For you listening, we've got a really mind-bending stack of sources today.
It really is.
Yeah, we're talking a collection of monographs, Zenodo preprints, Substack articles, and even some highly technical Reddit threads.
Which is always a fun mix.
Totally. And they are all centered around the work of Jericho M. Davila and his Bridge360 Metatheory Model. But what makes this even more fascinating is that this framework was actually co-authored, through a dialogical collaboration with multiple large language models.
Right, like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude.
Yeah.
It is a genuinely unique approach to scholarship. I mean, our mission in this deep dive is to explore this radical new way of understanding intelligence, AI, and global crises.
Right.
Because the core argument across all these texts is that shifting our focus from finding the truth to managing what the author calls entropy might actually be the only way to survive the massive interconnected challenges of the 21st century.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the sources claim that the entire concept of truth-seeking, which, let's be real, is basically the bedrock of human philosophy and science.
Oh, absolutely.
They're saying it's fundamentally flawed when it comes to complex systems. And I have to push back here early on. I mean, isn't finding the truth the whole point of intelligence?
You would think so.
Right. If we aren't seeking truth, what are we even doing? It feels like we are deciding to drive a car blindfolded and just hoping we don't hit a wall.
Yeah, that reaction makes total sense, especially given how we are all raised to revere objective facts. But let's examine the conditions of the modern world for a second.
Okay.
The texts describe a condition called computational intractability.
Computational intractability.
Right. Simply put, when systems become incredibly complex, highly volatile, and deeply interconnected, searching for a perfect objective truth just takes too much time and computing power.
Ah, I see.
By the time you gather all the variables to calculate the absolute truth of a situation, the system has already morphed into something else entirely. Or it's just collapsed.
So basically, the world moves way faster than our capacity to compute the truth of it.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. And the text actually uses a brilliant analogy for this. Imagine a diver who is plunged into incredibly murky, turbulent water.
Sounds terrifying, but okay.
Right. So a diver who tries to mentally map the exact objective reality of the murky seabed, like calculating the distance to every single rock and current.
Oh, they're going to drown.
They're going to run out of air and drown.
Mm.
But the diver who simply follows the entropy gradient, who just, knows that air bubbles always rise to the surface, that diver survives.
Wow.
They don't have the complete truth of the ocean, but they have navigability.
That is such a good way to put it. So intelligence isn't about perfectly mapping reality. It is about continuously navigating chaos.
Precisely.
And Bridge360 basically gives us a mathematical map for that chaos, which it calls the unified probability space. And it maps everything on a scale of entropy from 0 to 1. So 0 represents perfect order, but the catch is perfect order actually means the system is totally rigid, which makes it highly fragile.
Yeah, it's brittle.
Like, if a single unexpected variable hits a perfectly ordered system, the whole thing just shatters.
Exactly. And on the other end of the spectrum, a measurement of 1 is just total chaos. I mean, it is uniform noise.
Right.
You cannot build a society or an AI or an economy at 0,
Yeah.
and you certainly cannot govern one at a state of 1.
So you have to be in the middle somewhere. And the crucial part of the scale, according to the sources, is the epsilon spine.
Yes.
The model defines this as the strict navigable corridor for any system to survive. And it sits exclusively between 0.45 and 0.65 on that entropy scale.
Which is a very specific window.
Right. If your system drops below 0.45, you enter what they call the inbreeding zone.
Yeah, it becomes too brittle.
Too over-constrained, like a genetic line that just lacks diversity. But then if you push above 0.65, you hit the blowout zone.
And that's where noise completely overwhelms structure.
Got it.
Now, to measure where a system actually sits, the author introduces a concept called the normalized entropy eigenvector.
Okay, that sounds like heavy math jargon.
It does. But to strip away all that jargon, think of an eigenvector simply as a directional arrow pointing toward the system's underlying trend.
Okay, like a momentum indicator.
Exactly. Is the core momentum of this system trending toward brittle rigidity, or is it trending toward uncontrollable chaos?
Oh, I see.
In this model, an idea or a system isn't evaluated on whether it is objectively true, but on whether its mathematical arrow keeps it safely within that 0.45 to 0.65 survival spine.
So validity is entirely replaced by thermodynamic stability.
You got it.
That is wild. Okay, so we've established that survival beats objective truth in complex systems. But what happens when we apply that lens to the machines we're actually being right now to process information?
This is where it gets really fun.
Yeah, because here's where it gets really interesting. The sources make a massive leap regarding memetics. And, we usually think of memes as funny internet pictures.
Right, or at best, just abstract cultural ideas floating around in the zeitgeist.
Exactly. But the sources argue these are literal physical things. How do they justify that leap?
This is arguably the most groundbreaking claim in the preprints. It's called Rule of Inference Memetics, or RIM.
RIM.
Yeah. The author argues that rules of inference, like the actual templates of how we reason, whether they are logically sound deductions or complete logical fallacies,
Okay.
they are physical replicators. Just like biological genes require a physical substrate made of DNA to exist and replicate, memes require a physical substrate.
Wait.
Yeah.
So the breakthrough proposed here is that the transformer weight matrices in large language models, the underlying architecture of AIs like ChatGPT, are the first genuine, measurable physical substrate for memes.
That's the claim.
I really want to make sure I grasp the mechanics of this. Are you saying that when a rule of reasoning gets processed by an AI, it isn't just software code running in the background, like it becomes a literal physical structure?
Well, let's look at how a transformer network operates.
Okay.
It is essentially a massive matrix of numbers, or weights, that dictate how tokens of text relate to one another. When an AI processes a massive amount of human text, it absorbs our patterns of reasoning.
Right, the training data.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if a specific logical fallacy is repeated often enough in the training data, the neural weights in the LLM physically shift to embed that reasoning path.
Oh, wow.
It takes up actual computational space. It requires physical electricity to maintain. It moves memetics from being just a fun cultural metaphor to a hard empirical science.
Which completely reframes how we look at AI hallucination. Like, hallucinations, or what the text calls sophistry, aren't just innocent software bugs or the AI making a harmless mistake.
No, not at all.
They are memetic pathologies. They are parasitic rules of inference that are highly virulent. They sound incredibly plausible, but they cause a massive spike in the system's entropy, basically pushing the AI's output above that 0.65 blowout threshold.
Spot on. And to prevent that thermodynamic blowout, Bridge360 introduces something called Axiom 19.
Axiom 19.
Think of it as a thermodynamic bouncer standing at the door of the AI's logic pathways, just constantly checking the system's entropy budget.
Like checking IDs at the club.
Basically. Before the AI finalizes an output, Axiom 19 acts as an admissibility filter. If a generated thought process is going to cause a fragility spike, if it is highly virulent nonsense, the filter rejects it before it can propagate through the network.
And this ties directly into how we, as biological humans, are supposed to interact with an artificial superintelligence moving forward.
Yeah.
The model proposes the human and ASI braid identity, or BID. And I love the mechanics of this concept. It's a dual-key governance system.
The submarine missile launch analogy works perfectly here.
Yes, two people turning the keys at the same time.
Exactly. Because you cannot simply slap standard guardrails onto a superintelligence. I mean, a system that complex will always find a way to route around static rules.
They always do.
Right. So instead, you establish a managed, continuous dialogue Under the braid identity, the human director and the AI generator must independently attest to the system's thermodynamic stability at regular checkpoints.
So neither the human nor the AI can unilaterally change the governance corridor without the other turning their key.
That's right. The human's prompt, the AI's generated response, and the combined synthesis of their interaction must all individually remain within that 0.45 to 0.65 entropy spine.
It totally replaces the illusion of human control with, like, a thermodynamic partnership.
It really does.
But, okay, if these thermodynamic rules dictate AI architecture, it makes me wonder about the biological architects who built them, namely us.
Right, humans.
Yeah, how do human social behaviors fit into this geometry? Which brings us to a concept in the texts called entropy-driven altruism, or ED. But I have to admit, I am struggling a bit with the reductionism here.
How so?
Well, altruism is universally framed as a moral choice, right? Like an emotional empathy we feel for others. Are the sources seriously claiming that human morality is just cold physics?
It sounds cynical at first, I know, but it actually resolves a century-old debate in evolutionary biology.
Okay, I'm listening.
Historically, we have pitted Darwinian natural selection, the survival of the fittest, where selfish individuals outcompete others, against Peter Kropotkin's theory of mutual aid, which observes that highly cooperative species are the ones that actually dominate ecosystems.
Right, the classic debate.
Yeah, well, entropy-driven altruism argues they are not competing theories. They are simply expressions of entropy dynamics operating at different scales.
Wait, so altruism isn't an ethical preference, it is a mathematical survival strategy.
Exactly.
Okay, let me see if I can translate the mechanics of this. So, if an agent in a system, say a massive factory, decides to externalize its entropy by dumping toxic waste into the local river.
Right, a classic example.
The factory stays perfectly ordered internally, right? It saves money, it saves energy. But the ambient entropy of the surrounding town skyrockets. The whole ecosystem's fragility index goes up.
Exactly. And it goes up until the town's ecosystem becomes so fragile that a single shock, like a drought or a disease outbreak, causes the entire regional economy to collapse.
Oh.
Which completely destroys the selfish factory along with everyone else.
Because by externalizing their chaos, they doomed their own foundation.
Precisely. Conversely, by actively minimizing the entropy burden of the other agents around you, by cooperating, sharing resources, cleaning up waste, you ensure the entire macro system stays within that 0.45 to 0.65 survival spine.
If you hoard all the order for yourself and dump all your chaos on your neighbors, your neighborhood burns down.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture for you listening, think about the cooperative behaviors you engage in daily. You know, helping a colleague at work, supporting your family, volunteering in your community. You are actively lowering the ambient entropy for everyone, which keeps the networks you rely on navigable and stable.
It reframes good morals into literal structural survival.
It really does.
So we see how hoarding order destroys biological ecosystems. But the most terrifying place this plays out isn't in nature. It's in human financial markets.
Oh boy, yes.
Where we've literally built massive global systems specifically designed to externalize risk. This brings us to how Bridge360 stress tests its own theory against the global economy.
The ultimate testing ground for complex systems theory.
Totally. And the sources bring up a fascinating historical case study known as the Mrs. Watanabe phenomenon.
I love this example.
It's so good. So originally, Mrs. Watanabe was just a meme, a fictional, stereotypical representation of a prudent Japanese housewife looking for better return on her family's savings. But that meme became a physical market reality. It provided a highly replicable, incredibly simple inference rule for investors. Borrow Japanese yen at near-zero interest rates and use that virtually free money to buy high-yielding foreign assets.
The classic carry trade. And what this illustrates so clearly is a mechanism the model calls the volatility paradox.
Which is where a local optimization creates a massive blind spot that leads to global fragility.
Exactly. Let's look at the mechanics of why that happened. The Bank of Japan spent years heavily suppressing bond volatility locally. They wanted a perfectly stable, ordered domestic environment.
Right.
But that artificial local stability acted as a beacon. It encouraged the Mrs. Watanabe meme to replicate globally at an unprecedented scale. Hedge funds, banks, and institutions borrowed trillions of yen because the Bank of Japan made it feel mathematically risk-free.
But by doing so, all those actors were externalizing their risk, drastically increasing the hidden fragility of the entire global system.
Yes. So when the Bank of Japan finally faced inflationary pressure and had to let rates rise, all that hidden fragility violently snapped back, unraveling trillions of dollars in global trades.
And this connects directly to a deeply structural Substack article in our sources that links this Japanese government bond crisis, the current AI tech valuation bubble, and Trump tariffs. Now, I want to be crystal clear to you listening. We are not taking any political side here on tariffs, whether left-wing or right-wing.
Absolutely not. Maintaining that neutral structural view is vital here.
Exactly. We are strictly and impartially reporting on the structural analysis laid out in these source materials to understand the thermodynamic mechanics the author is proposing.
Right. And the author argues that the global financial system is not a series of isolated events. It operates on a single, finite entropy budget. These different economic forces are what the author calls stacked attractor layers.
Okay, the metaphor that keeps coming to my mind for this isn't a stack of blocks, but a single old power strip in a house.
Ooh, I like that.
Right, because you have a fixed budget of electricity. If you plug in too many massive appliances, they all compete for that same capacity, and eventually the breaker trips.
That captures the thermodynamics perfectly. According to the source, the Trump tariffs sit at the structural base layer of this power strip.
Okay.
Tariffs force companies to rebuild perfectly functional global supply chains from scratch. That wastes massive amounts of resources, time, and energy.
Yeah.
Mechanically, this raises the structural inflation floor, which in turn permanently raises the background fragility parameter, what the model calls the F parameter, for the entire global economy. It consumes a huge portion of the global entropy budget right at the base.
So using the metaphor, the microwave is turned on, drawing heavy power.
Exactly. Then the stress pushes up into the next layer, the Japanese government bond market.
Right.
Because global inflation is now structurally higher due to the base layer stress, Japan can no longer maintain its artificial zero-rate environment. The Bank of Japan has to expend vastly more of its remaining entropy budget just to keep its bond market from collapsing.
Which stresses the global discount rate, so the space heater gets plugged into the power strip.
Yes. Finally, sitting at the very top of this precarious circuit is the AI valuation bubble.
Oh, wow.
The current AI boom is a highly narrative-dependent attractor. It relies almost entirely on cheap liquidity and stable, low discount rates to justify its massive valuations.
Right, it needs the cheap money.
But because the tariffs consume so much entropy at the bottom and the Japanese bond crisis consumed the remaining stability in the middle, the navigable corridor for AI valuations at the top shrinks drastically.
They're all coupled attractors maxing out the same power strip.
Exactly. A thermodynamic shock at the base mathematically forces a violent contraction at the top.
Oh, man. With all these massive claims scaling from AI architecture to human biology to global financial circuitry, it sounds like an all-encompassing theory of everything.
It does.
But the sources are surprisingly humble about what they can actually achieve. I mean, if the Bridge360 model can't give us exact actionable predictions, like telling us exactly which Tuesday the stock market will crash, what is its actual utility?
That's a great question.
To me, it reads less like a crystal ball and more like an API, an application programming interface. Like, it builds the structural slots, but it requires someone else to bring the actual data to plug into those slots.
And the author explicitly recognizes this limitation through what they call the Handshake Protocol.
The Handshake Protocol.
Yeah. Bridge360 classifies itself under its own rigorous rules as a Band C exploratory philosophy of science artifact.
So it actively refuses to claim it has found the ultimate objective truth.
Exactly. It makes zero metaphysical claims. It doesn't present itself as self-certified Bandai-Shard science.
Right.
Instead, it invites domain scientists, economists, and engineers to provide the observables, the hard measurements, and the empirical data to fill its structural slots. It essentially says, here's the thermodynamic skeleton of how systems survive. You bring the flesh and blood of your specific discipline to test if it holds weight.
And we actually have a successful example of this handshake documented in the sources.
We do.
It's called the Epiplexity Handshake, version 20.5. And it is the first successful instantiation of this meta-theory into the hard science of machine learning.
The mechanics of how this handshake occurred are just fascinating.
Yeah.
So in the Epiplexity Handshake, Bridge360 provided the conceptual K budget.
The knowledge budget.
Right, or the total thermodynamic capacity a system has for learning. Then, domain scientists stepped in and filled that theoretical skeleton with measurable metrics for AI performance.
Okay.
They separated the model's output into two hard variables, ST, which represents the learnable, stable structural content an AI has acquired, and HT, which represents the residual time-bounded noise or hallucination.
So they basically separated the concrete signal from the thermodynamic noise.
Exactly. And by quantifying those variables as entropy, the scientists empirically proved that keeping a machine learning model strictly confined to the 0.45 to 0.65 navigable spine actually increases its stable structural content, the ST, while systematically reducing the noise, the HT.
That is incredible.
This modularity is Bridge360's greatest triumph. It doesn't demand that domain scientists abandon their own tools and accept a brand new philosophical religion,
Right, it simply asks them to execute specific structural handshakes using the language of thermodynamics.
Exactly.
Well, we have covered immense ground today. Let's just quickly recap the terrain we've navigated. We began by dismantling the age-old human obsession with truth-seeking, exploring the mathematical reality that in deeply complex systems, hunting for absolute truth is just intractable.
Yep.
Instead, survival depends on entropy management, keeping our systems safely within that navigable 0.45 to 0.65 epsilon spine.
And then we observed how that paradigm applies to artificial intelligence. We broke down how rules of inference and cultural memes aren't just abstract ideas. They take up physical, energetic space in the transformer weights of an AI network.
We tackled entropy-driven altruism, translating biological cooperation from a soft moral preference into the hard thermodynamic math of survival, which proved that externalizing your chaos eventually destroys your own foundation.
Yeah.
And we stress-tested all of this against the global economy, using the power strip metaphor to understand how tariffs, Japanese bonds, and tech stocks are deeply coupled attractors fighting over a single finite entropy budget.
Leaving us with the Handshake Protocol, which provides a humble API-like framework for hard science to actually measure and validate these thermodynamic claims.
So, for you listening, as you navigate the overwhelming complexity of your own life, maybe the secret to avoiding complete burnout isn't endlessly searching for the absolute, objective truth of every single argument, political crisis, or piece of information you encounter.
Right.
Maybe the goal is simply to manage your personal thermodynamics. Keep your life systems, your relationships, and your daily information diet within that navigable 0.45 to 0.65 spine.
I'd like to leave you with one final provocative thought to consider, something that emerges from everything we've synthesized today.
Okay, let's hear it.
If these large language models are the very first complex entities we have ever created that operate entirely on pure entropy attraction rather than human-like truth-seeking,
Yeah.
and considering that human governance historically fails precisely because we become blinded by our own subjective truth-seeking narrative.
Right, we get in our own way.
Exactly. Well, the only way to successfully govern the highly volatile, globally coupled systems of the future require us to remove human truth-seeking from the loop entirely and surrender the steering wheel to an artificial superintelligence that only manages pure thermodynamics.
Wow. Are we just the lost hiker holding the broken compass while the AI is the only entity that actually knows how to survive the forest?
It's entirely possible.
That is a massive question to sit with. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. Keep questioning your own paradigms, keep your entropy in check, and we will catch you next time.